It was a Saturday morning when Sophie told me she was heading to a wedding. She'd packed her dress, a slinky number in midnight blue that hugged her frame just the right way, and was making small talk about how excited she was to catch up with old friends. I didn't mind. Sophie had always been the social butterfly, the life of every party, and I, the quiet observer, happy to support her from the sideline. It was one of those days when the silence between us felt comfortable, even soothing. "Have a great time, babe," I said, kissing her on the cheek as she slipped her heels on. "Tell everyone I said hi." I stayed behind, planning to enjoy a peaceful day alone. The house was still and calm after she left, a break from the usual rush of our busy lives. I even had a nice dinner planned for myself, a rare treat when Sophie wasn't around to organize every little detail. I settled in with a book, the sound of the clock ticking more noticeable in the quiet space than usual. Hours passed, and I went about my day, reading, cooking, taking a walk around the neighborhood. By evening, I thought about texting Sophie, asking how things were going. But something stopped me. It wasn't a nagging feeling, more like a curiosity. I checked social media instead, scrolling aimlessly through posts from friends, family, and acquaintances. It wasn't like me to check on Sophie when she was out, but that day I felt like something was missing, like a thread had been pulled from the fabric of my routine. Unraveling it just a little, and then I saw it. A photo tagged in real time, a post uploaded within minutes of Sophie's departure from our home. Sophie wasn't at a wedding, as she'd claimed. She was stepping out of a hotel, a wide smile on her face, her hand confidently in Ryan's. My heart skipped a beat. Ryan, I knew who he was, one of her friends from college, someone she had mentioned many times, but never with the same enthusiasm she spoke of other friends. Their bond seemed harmless enough, or at least that's what I had told myself. But seeing her with him now, laughing, carefree, it did something to me. The image felt like a slap in the face, as though the world had tilted slightly off-center. I didn't need to see any more. The truth was there, in plain sight. Sophie thought I wouldn't check. She thought she could pull it off without me noticing, but there it was, evidence of something I couldn't deny. Sophie had lied, and the smile in that photo was all I needed to know everything. I sat there staring at the photo on my phone, the image frozen on the screen like a snapshot of everything I had feared. Sophie smiling up at Ryan, her hand casually resting in his. In the background, the familiar silhouette of a hotel loomed large, nothing like the wedding ballroom she had promised she'd be in. The world around me seemed to freeze, and for a few moments I couldn't do anything but breathe. Deeply, in and out, trying to shake the growing lump in my throat. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. But as I looked at her, so at ease with him, something inside me shattered. All those nights she stayed late at work, the business trips that never seemed to add up, the odd hours she kept, all of it started to form a clearer picture. The dots had been there all along, and I had just chosen to ignore them, thinking they were nothing more than the natural ebb and flow of a marriage. But the more I looked at the photo, the more I couldn't deny the truth that had been staring me in the face for months, maybe even years. Sophie had lied. She'd spun a story, crafted an excuse so neat that I had never once thought to question it. She was going to a wedding. Why wouldn't I believe that? She packed her dress, made sure everything looked perfect before leaving, and kissed me goodbye with that warm, almost too genuine smile of hers. And I had fallen for it like a fool. I ran my hand over my face, trying to stop the swirling thoughts that were flooding my mind. It wasn't just the lie that hurt. It was the betrayal. Sophie had always been someone I could trust. We had built a life together, and I had believed in every word she said. But now, here I was, staring at a photo that said otherwise. A photo that had undone everything we had. I couldn't help but replay the events of the day in my mind. Sophie had left in the morning, and I had wished her well, genuinely happy for her to reconnect with old friends. I had been excited to spend the day alone, to enjoy some peace and quiet. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect her to be stepping out of a hotel, laughing with him, like it was the most natural thing in the world. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the comments beneath the post, reading through the messages of well wishes from friends and family, unaware of the reality I now knew. "Looks like you're having the best time, Sophie," one person wrote. Another, "Ryan is such a great guy. So glad you two are having fun." But it wasn't fun. It wasn't innocent. It was a lie, and it felt like someone had ripped the ground out from under me. A cold feeling crept over me. The photo was only the beginning. I had seen it with my own eyes, but there were questions left unanswered. Why had Sophie gone to such lengths to hide this from me? Was Ryan just a friend? Were there more lies waiting to be uncovered? I thought about calling her right away, confronting her with a photo, but something stopped me. Maybe it was my anger. Maybe it was the realization that I had been blind to everything happening around me. I didn't know how to feel. Betrayed? Yes. Hurt? Absolutely. But mostly, I felt stupid. I felt foolish for trusting someone who had, in the blink of an eye, proven that my trust meant nothing to her. I went to the kitchen, pacing back and forth, trying to make sense of it all. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with images of Sophie and Ryan together, and I couldn't stop the barrage of thoughts that filled my head. I had to know the truth. I couldn't just sit here and wonder what was going on. The silence in the house was deafening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something fundamental and irreparable. I had always considered myself a patient person, a calm listener, someone who trusted without question, but now, with the truth staring me in the face, I realized how easily I had been taken for a fool. And what hurt the most was knowing that Sophie had known I would never question her, that I would always be the one waiting for her to come home, believing that everything she said was the truth. I thought about all the times she'd come home late, her hair a little messier than usual, her clothes just a little more disheveled than before. I had chalked it up to work stress, late meetings, the usual, but those small details had never seemed so important until now, until I saw her in that hotel with him. The weight of it was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think clearly. The only thing that mattered now was figuring out what had happened. Why had she chosen this path? Why had she lied to me? And how long had this been going on? I grabbed my phone again, the image still glaring at me from the screen. I couldn't look away. I needed to know. This wasn't just about a picture. It wasn't just about Sophie's lie. It was about everything. Every moment we had shared. Every promise she had made. Every time she had told me she loved me. And I realized then that I wasn't the man I used to be. The man who trusted without question. The man who gave love freely without expecting anything in return. No, I was someone else now. Someone who had been broken open. Someone who could never go back to the way things were. I could feel my pulse quicken as the anger began to set in. I wasn't going to sit back and let this go unanswered. I needed to confront her. I needed to know why. And once I did, everything would change. That night Sophie came home, a whirlwind of energy as she bounced through the door. She was full of excitement, eager to recount the details of her day. "Babe, you won't believe how much fun I had," she exclaimed, kicking off her shoes and heading toward the kitchen, her voice bubbling with a joy that felt foreign in my ears. "It was the perfect escape, just what I needed. I ran into so many old friends and everyone looked amazing. I didn't want it to end." I stayed where I was, sitting on the couch, my phone still clutched in my hand. I hadn't moved since she left the house, staring at the photo of her and Ryan, replaying it over and over in my mind. The way they had looked at each other, the intimacy in their smiles, told me everything I needed to know. They were more than friends. I didn't know how long this affair had been going on, but I knew it was real, and it had been hidden from me for far too long. Sophie was rambling about the wedding she had attended, and though I could hear her words, they seemed to come from far away, as if I were in a dream detached from reality. I felt the dissonance between her words and the image in my mind. The woman in the photo was not the woman standing before me now, laughing and glowing. How could she be so convincing? How could she stand here and tell me about the night she had spent with him when I knew exactly what had happened? I tried to keep my emotions in check, but it was difficult. The anger was boiling inside me, threatening to spill over. How could she think I wouldn't notice? How could she believe I wouldn't check, that I wouldn't see through her carefully constructed story? The lie had been so seamless, so expertly delivered, and I'd fallen for it. I hadn't questioned her, hadn't dug deeper when something didn't sit right, and now I was paying the price. Sophie continued, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I could hear her excitement in the way she spoke, her words filled with an energy that didn't match the crushing weight in my chest. Every sentence felt like a betrayal. "Ryan said he'd missed seeing everyone so much," she went on, "and I swear we could have stayed out all night talking. He's such a great guy, you know." I had to stop myself from speaking. The anger was rising, and I knew that if I said anything too soon it would come out all wrong. I needed to approach this calmly, to let her speak, to let her dig her own hole. I wasn't sure if I wanted an apology or if I just wanted the truth. But either way, this conversation was going to change everything. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The silence between us stretched on as I sat there, watching her move around the room, unpacking her things, clearly oblivious to the chaos she had set into motion. How could she act so normal after everything? After all the lies? Didn't she see it in my eyes? The way I was looking at her? Cold? Distant? I wasn't sure if I even recognized the woman in front of me anymore. She looked up, then, her eyes sparkling as she put the dress she'd worn to the wedding in the laundry basket. "I'm so glad I went," she said, still smiling. "It felt like a fresh start, like I needed that little escape." She turned to face me, her smile still in place, but the glint in her eyes started to fade as she saw my expression. The moment I'd been dreading had finally arrived. She could feel it now. She had to. Sophie had always been able to read me, to know when something was wrong, even when I didn't speak it aloud. Her smile faltered just slightly, her confidence slipping away, and for the first time that night she seemed to hesitate. "Jack?" she asked, her voice suddenly soft, almost tentative. "What's going on? You're awfully quiet. Did something happen?" I stood up, my body moving almost instinctively, driven by a need to confront her. "How was the hotel?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with an edge. Sophie froze mid-step, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second, a fleeting look of panic flashing across her face before she quickly masked it with a nervous smile. "What do you mean?" "The hotel. I told you it was a wedding. There's nothing to worry about." The words stung, but I was ready. I didn't need to hear any more excuses. I pulled out my phone and held it up, the screen still displaying the photo of her with Ryan, laughing as they walked out of that hotel. She stared at it for a long moment, her face paling as the reality of what I had seen sank in. The silence between us felt like an eternity, the weight of it pressing down on both of us. Sophie opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She closed it again, her eyes darting nervously to the floor. I didn't let her explain. I didn't need to hear the lies anymore. The photo was enough. It said everything. "I know everything, Sophie," I said, my voice low but firm. "Don't try to deny it. Don't try to tell me this was just a misunderstanding. I saw you with him. I saw you, Sophie. I saw what you were doing behind my back." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I had been a fool, trusting her, believing in her. The lies were over, and now the truth had come crashing down. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, Jack. I trusted you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I trusted you, and you broke me. You broke everything, Sophie." She took a step toward me, her hands outstretched, but I stepped back. I couldn't let her touch me, not now. Not after everything. "You don't get to apologize," I said. "You don't get to fix this. The damage is done." The silence that followed my words was suffocating. Sophie stood there, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself, but there was no escaping the truth. The facade was gone, and now, standing in front of me, she was just a woman who had lied, again and again. She had betrayed me, and I could feel the weight of that betrayal in every inch of my body. My heart, which had once been full of trust, was now hollow, and nothing she said would change that. She took a step closer, but I held up my hand, signaling for her to stop. I wasn't sure I could stand another moment of her proximity, of her false assurances. "Don't!" I said, my voice sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. "You don't get to do that anymore. You don't get to act like everything is fine." Sophie stopped. her face crumpling with emotion. "Jack, please," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "It wasn't like that, I swear." I shook my head, the frustration building again. "You think I don't know that? You think I'm stupid? You've been lying to me for months, Sophie. I saw you with him. I saw the way you looked at him. It wasn't just some casual hangout. Don't you dare try to make this out like it was." She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She looked at me with those pleading eyes, the ones that had always been able to make me believe in her, to make me believe in us. But now those eyes were empty to me. They were just the eyes of someone who had hidden the truth for far too long. And I wasn't buying it anymore. "It's not what you think," Sophie said, her voice cracking. "We've been through so much together, Jack. I never meant for any of this to happen." I let out a harsh laugh, bitterness flooding my chest. "Never meant for it to happen? You think I believe that? You think I believe that you just accidentally fell into bed with Ryan? That this was all some kind of mistake?" My words were cold, each one hitting like a hammer. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't care." She looked at me, her face crumpling in pain. "I love you, Jack. I do. I always have." The words hit me like a slap, but they didn't have the power they used to. I had heard them too many times, and each time they were followed by a betrayal. Sophie's love meant nothing to me now. It was just a word, empty and hollow, without any of the sincerity I once believed it held. "You don't get to say that anymore," I said, my voice growing firmer with each word. "You don't get to pull the I love you card when you've done nothing but hurt me. You've broken every promise you made to me." She took a shaky breath, and I could see the guilt written all over her face. She knew, deep down, that there was no easy way out of this. She knew she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But she didn't seem ready to let go. She wasn't ready to accept that this was over. Not yet. "I didn't know how to fix things, Jack," Sophie admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been so lost. The distance between us kept growing, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get it back." The words hung in the air, but they felt like excuses. I wanted to scream, to tell her that her actions were unforgivable, but I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, processing everything she had said, and I felt something inside me begin to shift. The anger, which had been so sharp, began to dull, replaced by a cold resignation. This wasn't about fighting anymore. This was about acceptance. "Maybe I could have been better," Sophie continued, her eyes searching mine. "Maybe I could have tried harder. But you were always so busy, so distant. I just didn't feel seen anymore, Jack. I didn't feel like I mattered." I shook my head slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "You don't get to blame me for this. You don't get to pin this on me. You made a choice, Sophie. You chose him. You chose to lie to me. And now I have to live with that. I have to live with knowing that everything we had was built on a lie." She took a step forward, her hands reaching out to me once more, but this time I didn't pull away. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, as she gently touched my arm. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to hurt you. Please, just..." I pulled away, the finality in my movements saying everything I didn't have the strength to say. "No, don't apologize. You had your chance to fix this and you threw it away. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep waiting for something that's never going to come." Sophie stared at me, her face pale, her tears falling freely now. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The truth was there, hanging between us like an insurmountable wall, and she knew it. There was no way around it. There was nothing more to say. "You need to leave, Sophie," I said, my voice steady but devoid of any warmth. "I need you to leave. I need to move on. I need to rebuild my life without you in it." Her expression faltered for a moment, but she nodded, defeated. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The sound of her footsteps as she turned and walked toward the door was almost unbearable. I could hear the faint sobs as she left, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. What stood before me now was a stranger, someone who had taken everything I trusted and shattered it. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I knew that there was no going back. The silence in the house felt heavier now. Sophie was gone, and with her departure, a part of me seemed to unravel, though I had no intention of letting it consume me. As I stood there in the living room, the weight of the evening slowly settling on my shoulders, I realized something deep inside me. This was the beginning of the end. I had made the right decision. I had asked Sophie to leave, and she had. The moment she walked out that door, I knew I had to move on. There was no turning back. There was no way to undo the damage she had done, but there was a chance for me to find something better for myself. A life where I wasn't just living in the shadow of lies. I walked over to the couch and sat down, the remnants of her presence still lingering in the air. Her perfume was faint, but it was enough to remind me of everything that had once been. I ran my hand through my hair, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. The relief was overpowering at first. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my chest, the pressure that had been building for so long finally easing. But beneath that relief there was the sadness, the realization that the woman I had spent years with, the woman I thought I knew, had turned out to be someone I couldn't trust. I glanced at the empty space beside me on the couch where Sophie had once sat, and a strange sense of emptiness washed over me. I should have been angry. I should have been screaming at the top of my lungs. But I wasn't. I felt nothing, and that scared me more than anything else. I had spent so much time invested in her, in our life together, that now that she was gone, it felt like I was losing a part of myself, too. But deep down, I knew I wasn't losing anything worth holding on to. I had to remind myself of that. This wasn't about the person I had loved, it was about the person I had become while I was with her. A person who had been deceived. A person who had been too trusting, too blind to the truth right in front of him. I stood up and walked over to the window, gazing out at the quiet street. The world seemed still, but inside my mind was racing. I thought about what Sophie had said, about the wedding, about Ryan, and I couldn't shake the image of them together, of her looking at him the way she used to look at me. That thought, more than anything, was what hurt the most. The love she had once given me, the trust I had placed in her, had been replaced with something else, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for that, but I wasn't going to dwell on it. I wasn't going to let it control me any longer. I had spent so many years trying to be the person she wanted me to be, trying to make her happy, to build a life we both could be proud of. But that life was over now, and it was time for me to rebuild, to rediscover who I was without her. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet. I didn't know if it was a good idea, but I needed something to calm my nerves. As the amber liquid poured into the glass, I felt a strange sense of finality settle in. This was the end, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I took a sip of the whiskey, the warmth spreading through my body, and for a moment I let myself feel the loss. The years with Sophie, the plans we had made, the dreams we had shared, it all seemed so far away now. But I didn't want to stay in that place of sadness. I couldn't. I had been given a chance to move forward, to heal, and that's what I was going to do. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, but I also knew that I was stronger than I had been before. I had survived betrayal, and I would survive this too. I would learn to trust again, to love again, but only when I was ready. And that wouldn't be any time soon. As I sat there staring at the empty glass in my hand, I realized that I wasn't alone in this. I had friends, family, people who cared about me, who wanted to see me happy. I wasn't some broken man who would live in the past forever. I had a future to look forward to, and I was going to make the most of it. I couldn't let Sophie's actions define me. I couldn't let the lies she had woven dictate my life from this point on. I had a right to happiness, to peace, and to a future that wasn't overshadowed by someone else's mistakes. The phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from my brother. "You good, man?" It read. I smiled to myself and typed back, "I will be. I'm done with the past. Time to move forward." And with that, I set the phone down and took another sip of whiskey. The road ahead would be challenging, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had nothing to lose, and everything to gain. Sophie was gone, but I was still here, and that was enough.